Welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Rachel and Dana. This is a podcast where two book coaches, editors, and besties discuss books not as readers but as writers to draw inspiration from great books and have a lot of laughs along the way. And that is true 100% of the time because literally we were trying to record the intro and we couldn't stop giggling. So if you're new here, brace yourself. There's going to be a lot of giggling and a lot of silliness. If you are a returning customer, if you're coming back, welcome back. We're so glad you're still here with us. So this week we are kicking off our discussion of Twisted Love by Ana Huang. This is one of Dana's picks, of course. If you look at the cover, you just know. And it doesn't even have any sexy people on it. It's just, it's got the cursive writing and the pastel colors, which is interesting choice. Actually, we should talk about that when you think about, what dark romance. Now, this is still sort of contemporary at its core. We're going to get to it. We've got so much stuff to talk about, but I'm really excited. We have a great lineup over the next several weeks to go through the plot, the characters, and discuss our editor's takeaways. And so today we're just going to kind of open up the discussion and prime you for what's coming over the next few weeks. But, as always, before we do that, Dana, there's always something interesting going on over at Danger Tales. Hit me with just one thing that's going on. One interesting thing that you just want to drop. Let the
How
people
she
know
gonna
what
box
you're doing.
me in? How you gonna box me in and say one? You know I'm thinking one.
I mean,
like three,
well,
four,
I mean,
five,
if you want to tell me 10, you can. I just thought I'd take the stakes down because every time it's always like, oh yeah, small talk. And so I was like, give me one thing that's going on. I was trying to lob you a softball. You threw it back at me.
My bad. You did. Because I'm always shocked, as if it's not at the beginning of everything. She's like, I can take it away if it makes. No, we gotta do small talk.
No,
okay.
they're real big small talk.
Now, mister. Okay, well, at the time of this, by the time you all are hearing this, we're preparing for our retreat. Woo! And so, our virtual retreat, which has been a sort of interesting evolution. I used to do retreats in the area for many, many years. And then once we had the panty, I went to virtual, and this will be our third one that we've done like this, where it covers over several days and we sort of reflect over the current year, and we begin to sort of have some sort of future casting, if you will, for the next year. And then I usually have we have modules or sessions where I'm walking them through activities and brainstorming, like very hands-on. And then there's others where it's sort of equipping, and so I'm looking forward to it, and it's always a great way for us to end the year. And for me personally, it started because I always planned my next year in November, because I like to have it done in November, let it marinate in December, so I know what things really stick. And so I've just brought that in, and this is open to all of my existing active clients. They're a part of it, and it's not anything that anyone can pay for or anything like that. And what's also really cool is you only get it if you are present. So you don't, you can't get it later, like after the fact. Yeah. And so I've just been always so surprised that every year it's sort of fresh, but it still feels as if it's a cohesive part of the previous years. Yeah. And so, so it becomes a very grounding 3 days, if you will. And so I'm looking forward to that. And it's so interesting that I'm working on that and about to do that while we are also starting to prepare for our 2026 retreats and events. So I think it's so exciting. This is going to be a great time. It's a great time to sort of relax, exhale. And I'm doing the exercises too for myself. I mean, normally I have a lot of them done in advance because I'm facilitating, but I do like to be in the moment and just be able to let myself be very present and think about my release schedule and what books and projects I want to work on and all of that. Like, I've already bought my planners for 2026. Like,
fresh planner.
Listen,
nothing like it. Not a thing in the world.
Not at all. Gotta love it. Listen, Crisp still in the box, ready to go. And girl, I have all the colors. I got all the colors. So it's It's probably a little bit shenanigans because I go overboard, but it is in the best possible way. So so they'll be doing that, and then yes, being able to have a couple of weeks off and some refreshing sort of reset, and I've been ready. I've been ready for this break since the break in July. So.
Yeah, I know. It's like we had the break in July, and then it's like the moment you show up, the first day of August, or whatever that, all of a sudden you're like, when's the next one again? It's just like all up on you.
Because it's been nonstop this second half of the year, but I'm not complaining. It's been great. And seeing some of the things that students are doing. Yeah. But it's one of those times, and I'm constantly reminded of my promise to myself of that the more that I'm helping people pursue their dreams and write their books, that I have to give myself the room and grace to be able to do the same. Because I've had seasons of working with clients and not doing it, and it just caused me to be so out of whack and unbalanced. And so the fact that I can celebrate another year of actively releasing and writing while working with clients and feeling like I'm getting better
this year.
Girl, I think I was like, who signed us up for this sway? I don't want to know the answer. I know we're not gonna do that. No judgment, no judgment zone. So it has been one of those years. But at the same time, I feel like I've grown and I've learned so much. And so I can't complain. I'm blessed. I'm too blessed to complain. And so, that's what we got going on at Danger Tales. What about you? What do you have going on at Story Cipher, Rachel?
Hang on look, I know that this is going to be me majoring in the minors, because that's a specialty of mine as just a human being. I gotta rewind to the very, very beginning, like the first sentence that you said.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Are we calling the pandemic the panty now?
Girl,
is that a thing we're doing? I did not get this memo. I was not invited. I think I would have vetoed this because it sounds an awful lot like panty, and I don't care for it.
It does, but here's the thing. You got to remember that I'm a person that I have a craft channel on YouTube, y'all. Y'all know I'm a quilter. And they would demonetize stuff if you said the whole word. So
pandemic?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
But it was basically because they did. I think it's like you didn't want it to be triggering after it happened or whatever. It would get to the point where if certain words that people would get demonetized. So I always said it in a so we know what we're talking about. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I did not realize that. I know that there are there's certain types of language that they're going to demonetize. I did not think pandemic as a word was one of them. That is okay.
It was like even like some of the conversations, and I think it's just because you start thinking about conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Whether to have vaccination or not. They were trying to crack down
on misinformation, and so they just did like a blanket, like nope, nobody's talking about it. Which means I'm not going to use that word for our podcast now for sure. Now it's apparently I would like to veto panty, but that's apparently what we're going to call it on the podcast too, because this also goes up on YouTube. So this is just when we say panty, you know what we're talking about, even though we are talking hot and steamy romance today.
Which is just very fitting. It goes with the conversation. So
we've got a whole brand for our conversation today.
So it just made it so much easier than trying to think about, wait, did I say it? Did I not say it? So I just never just a time.
I just learned something new. I've never, because we don't know, we talk often off of a recorded line. So I've never heard you use the phrase before. And so I was like, hang on, hold on, stop the presses. What's going on? As I said, absolutely majoring in the minors right now, but it stuck out and my brain was just like, I need answers.
Listen, I see the record, but I naturally go ahead and censor it so we don't have any issues. And so, listen, I know how to listen when the mic is hot. I know how to get it.
Boy, all right. Well, okay, so let me actually answer your question now that I've got my question answered. So we just finished in the academy our prep module on preparing for draft 2. So the way that we do it, and I've come to really like it this way, and it's hilarious because you asked me, like, would you ever write a draft in a month again? And I was like, no. And then I was like, wait, just kidding. Yes, I would. And I will do it again next year. So the month, this episode comes out, the past month, we'd been taking the month to review our first draft and plan for our second. So our first draft, right, we spent time outlining to kind of give ourselves a roadmap. And then we just like hit it hard and wrote the draft in a month. And that's really what I like so much about that. First of all, it's a very short-term commitment that you're making. You're like, I'm not going to do this. When you go through it, I'm not going to do this like, next month and the month after and the month after. At least for the Academy. If you're Dana, you absolutely will. But in the Academy, we're moving a little slower than Dana do. And so you kind of like just haul, like, and you just write that thing from start to finish so that you can see what you have. And what I like about that is that it really breaks the creative seal on the project. Once the first draft is done, because the first draft is hard and it's kind of doesn't always feel good to write because it's sort of like, it's not the thing that's in your head yet. And so when you do it in a month and like your goal is just to get to the end, it just keeps you moving, to not get hung up on stuff and to not go back and revise and get all worked up about stuff. You just finish the whole thing. So the module after that, then we take the time to say, okay, based on what you learned from actually writing your first draft, now let's address problems, let's make plans to solve those problems so we can write that second draft more intentionally, because now we have time to, layer in those changes and, we will see a little more prose. We will not perfect our prose, but more of it will start to layer in naturally because you have a foundation that you're kind of starting to build on and you're wrapping in those changes. So we spent the last month, and it's nice because after you, just like haul to do a first draft, to give everyone just like a breather module to like, okay, take a breath and also like shift back into that ideating, right? We're problem solving. We're letting our imagination kind of run wild about our stories and getting excited about them and working through those problems. That's preparing us so that we're going to do another haul in November where we write that second draft. And I planned it that way so that way also anyone in the Academy, if they wanted to participate in whatever version of Write a Novel in November you prefer, there's 30 and 30, there's Novel November, there's like a lot of different stuff kind of cropping up to replace NaNoWriMo, that they would be able to participate in that because it's just it's become a staple of the writing community. So we just finished that, and so this month will be all about implementing those changes in the second draft. So that's what we'll spend the next month doing, and I'm really excited because we've got people who've written their first drafts, and they've been through it. They've written a thing from start to finish, and it's been demystified. The second one will get a little easier. The third one will get a little easier. First drafts will never be like, oh, look, it comes out so great. But when you do it again, you're like, oh, yes, I remember what this is like. Versus when you do it for the first time, you're like, am I doing something wrong? Should it be this way? Is it supposed to? And it's like, yes, it just kind of sucks. It's fine. It's okay. Everybody feels that way. Everybody goes through it. And so it demystifies that experience. And I think the second draft is like where, honestly for me, like the second draft is where the fun really starts, because that's where the story starts really taking the shape that you want it to. And where you get to really, again, you're solving those problems and implementing those changes. So really a lot to look forward to in the second draft writing process. So I too am hauling tail trying to get a second draft done. And it's, when you get to the end of the year like this, just like you said, where you're kind of starting to like peter out and you're like, oh my God, like I'm getting tired. My brain is like having to work harder to do basic tasks. It's a big ask, but we're doing it and we're getting it done. So that's what we got going on at Story Cypher. It's second draft season, so woo!
You know what? I absolutely, first of all, I really love that that it falls when it does. Because the alignment with what is sort of happening almost like culturally, like across the writing community, you could take advantage of it. And I think what it does is it brings with it, especially this time of year, its own form of energy. So even if it was something that was a challenge, because it is still a challenge, I don't think, it doesn't matter how many times you do this, you will still have challenges because every story is like a kid. You know, every kid has their own thing, And so I think having the ability to go through that at a time that's already just very high in energy, and you have so many opportunities to write in the writing community that you could tap into. So I think that's great. But I think the most important part about the flow that you have in the academy that I like is it teaches the concept through practice of wearing hats.
Yeah.
Right? Like you find that you have your writing hat and you have your plotting hat and you have your editing hat. And I think understanding that and beginning to embrace what that means to you as a writer is sort of that gift that keeps giving. Because it will come in clutch when you're going through the process or when you need to stop yourself from creating bad habits of editing while you write or whatever. You're just like, let's go through this thing. And whether it's a novella or a short story or a novel, it can still be done in a month. But it's like, okay, how much energy and what do I need to bring to the table to do this? And to be at this stage, I think it's going to make the drafting process take on its own take. And so I think that's going to be so dope. I'm excited for you.
Thank you. I'm excited too, and I'm excited for the students again to get to see, at the end of that second draft, and then in December we'll do the revision stage, for them to just get to walk through the process and say, oh, I have a thing that I completed. I did.
Exactly.
And so then when they go into 2026, they say, I know how to do this for my next project. And they're already equipped with the tools that they need to do it again. Because the whole point of the academy is, and the whole point of really what we do with the podcast and our businesses is like, it's not just one story. You have so many stories to tell. And like, if you like, being a writer is writing many stories. And so that means everything doesn't live or die on this one story. And it also means that there's so much more like to be had in your writing journey. And so continuing to write and having the tools that you need so that you can continue writing it's like the best thing that you can take into the new year of like, oh, now I'm ready to tackle my next project in the new year and I know how to do it. And that's just like, and so when you see those wins pile up and you see students getting into it and understanding it and implementing and again, finishing a work for the first time, it's like, oh my God, it's so good.
Okay, so I have an ask, and it's on a recorded line. Can we please have an Aunt Dana like edition or a Dana bonus? Because I feel like I'm the honorary aunt of your students, okay? I'm cheering for them. I'm here with them. I believe the bonus should be that you should tell them after they're finished to print the manuscript. Like whenever first of all, I feel like this is back in the day because now people really don't do it, but I do have clients that still do it. And I remember when my editing clients used to send me a manuscript, like a physical manuscript. So, okay, so copies. Just in case she humors me. So one of the things I always would tell my students is you take your manuscripts and when you format it in its double space, 12 font, either Arial or Times New Roman, you want your page breaks between chapters, you want to make it nice, and then send it to a copy place. Send it to either your Kinko's, FedEx, Office Depot. Go ahead, jump and pay that extra $5 to $7. Have them spiral bound it, add a cover, and you add a title page on it, and then hold your manuscript in your hands. Listen, y'all, there is nothing ever like it. And I don't care how many books you write. That first one, it is its own thing, but just having that physical copy, and it also makes really great practice for your next revision too. So it's worth it. So I do tell my students, whenever you do this, print it on one side of the page. Don't do double-sided, even though it is cheaper, but don't do double-sided. Do one-sided, because as you go through and you do your reading, you can actually put your notes on the back side or in the margins, and 1-inch margins all the way around. So
if we can get a Dana bonus for like formatting books and like, listen,
come on.
If you want to bring some Aunt Dana energy to the academy, that the doors you're already in, babe.
Listen,
you're already in there. So
I would totally record a video so they can see how to do it. Because let me tell you something, to get to the end and to do that. And I think it should be before you do another revision, because seeing the words on a page is different than seeing it on a screen. You know this. Yes. We know this. But there is something about your students would have been through 6 months of giving birth, and now you hold the baby. And it's great for their spouses and their kids and the people who have supported them over these months to be able to see a thing. And I think it's so motivating to continue and to really get it to where it needs to be. So yes, if you let me do that, I would totally record a video. And they'll be like, what is she doing? Listen. I'll just listen to your girl, okay? We're going to hook you up, okay? $10, and it's going to make a change. Now, you could print it at home and then make it cheaper, right? Of course. But if you can send it and call your local place, and they normally have an email address or whatever, and then go and you pick it up and you just hold your print copy in your hands. And then, and like take pictures.
Hold my print copy in my hands.
You need to. And then take pictures and put it in the community. That would be so good.
We're having a whole separate session of like the people are listening in on. This is just another day of us talking, and this is how our conversations really just go all the time. I'm so excited. Okay, this is. I was actually talking to Trevor about this. Of like, you're kind of like our expert in like formatting and like KDP, like all of the like those like. Those publishing things that you don't think about until you have to do them, and then you're like, how do I? And so talking about how, like, would we be able to maybe get like some resources if Dana already has some, or like whatever, so that like the students can get a better understanding of how to do this side of it, and so.
I got you on both of those. Like, and then whether it's like, first of all, y'all, this is on a recording line. Yes, we still gonna leave it. But like to walk through and then even to give a little tutorial of how to do it so that you already have it in your arsenal. Yes, ma'am.
Hell yeah. Oh, I'm excited.
Okay, come on.
I'm so excited.
Hell yeah.
She's pulling out the horns. That's how excited she is.
I was going to do it earlier when you talked about Miss Board. And I was like, that is Rachel's signature move. Then I was going to salute from the back of the head. Then I said no, because people don't get that joke.
Me and my janky old salutes. Honestly, if you threw up the horns for me, it can and will make my day. So if you greet me and you're just like, "What's up?" and I'm like, oh man, that's how I know that you love me.
First of all, the fact that I'm from Texas, that's also hook 'em horns. It's like this weird thing. So
I love it so much. I'm like, yeah, metal, horns, and then it's also like, Texas is like sports.
Because it's like this, if I'm not mistaken, girl.
Really quick, hang on. Guys, I have to tell you this story really quick. I promise we'll be so fast.
Yes.
So I was out and about in public and ran into some people that we knew, and they were about to leave, and they did this, which is also like, I love you. And I went, yeah! And I was like, look at people throwing up the horns at me, and Trevor was like, babe, that's I love you. They're not giving you this is not like rock on. This is like, oh, I love you. And I was like, oh, no.
Rachel, you did one of those moments that I have with the Jeep Wave. It's like you just messed it up. You messed the whole thing up.
My bad. And now it's a bit, right? Like people give me this, and I'm like, yeah. Like now it's just it's the horns, and it's just what we're doing. So
you just look for the opportunity to show the love. We just love your energy, okay?
See.
But yes. But no, for real, dead serious. Like we'll get those between the bonus and then making sure they have the options, because there's something really great about knowing what your options are, even if you decide to pursue a different path and knowing how easy it is. It just takes a level of anxiety off of it and knowing that it's something that you literally can do.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh, guys, this is like brand new information to me that's happening as we're recording, and so I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. We have so much stuff to talk about. Yes. But we first Twisted Love by Ana Huang. Let's go. Okay. So, thank you all for going on this fabulous detour. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. If you enjoyed it half as much as I did, you are having a really great time. So before we dive into some of the overarching topics we want to hit today, Dana, would you hit the people with the summary?
I will. Twisted Love is a steamy, emotionally charged contemporary dark romance about two opposites bound by family, secrets, and obsession. When Ava Chen's protective older brother leaves town, he asks his best friend and cold calculating neighbor, Alex Volkov, to keep an eye on her. What begins as reluctant guardianship turns into an intense, forbidden attraction that forces both to confront old wounds. Alex hides a past scarred by loss and revenge. Ava carries buried trauma of her own. Their relationship becomes a collision of control and compassion, guilt and desire, light and darkness. It's a story about what happens when love cracks open the armor you've spent a lifetime building. A mix of grumpy sunshine, brother's best friend, and good girl, bad boy tropes. Reimagined for a modern audience, blending emotional heat with psychological depth.
All right. Always such a robust summary. So, what are some of the topics you want to hit today to kind of set everybody up for the conversation that we'll be having over the next 3 weeks?
Well, if this is your first time here, what's up? If you've been around before.
The podcast is always like this, so welcome.
It's really not always like this, but you know what? You never know what you're going to get. This is an overview where we talk a little bit about some of the things that you're going to get. We can't cover everything, which is why we have separate episodes, but I think I have a nice sizable list. So the first thing we want to talk a little bit is just about how this story really does have a great representation across both the plot structure and the character development. Y'all gonna see me gush. I think Rachel's gonna gush over it too, but that it's just very strong as far as the plotting and the character development. And it doesn't mean that it's perfect, but I think it's a really great sound, story. We also want to talk a little bit about the fact that this is like the tropes and the universal fantasies that are found in this book that make it both very sort of bingeable, if you will, for readers, but also has made it probably extremely popular when it comes to social media and marketing this series, because if I'm not mistaken, this series is around 3 or 4 years old.
Yes, it came out 2021. Twisted Love did.
See. So, and it's still trending and it's still at the top of the list. So, yes. I know that we wanted to take a little bit of time to make sure that we remind people that this does have dark romance elements. And so sort of merging a couple of my elements of making sure that there was the warning and also knowing that there are dark romance elements. But I still think this is something that you can enjoy. Another element that I have is that this is a story like romances, but it's really great to see that there's a dual transformation in this story for both of the protagonists. And the final thing, and I don't think we talked about this, we talk about it, I can't remember if we talked about it in a particular episode, but the fact that this is has a redemption story to it, so that it is morally gray, but it is a little bit different than some of the other morally gray romances that you may read, and that there is a redemption arc to it. And so yeah, those are the things. I'm sure a couple of other things will come up, but those are the highlights of what I'd like us to make sure we capture.
Awesome. Yeah. And, mine are going to wrap just right up into yours of, one of the things that we'll be talking about is how she nested her plots and subplots, weaving them together, but also appropriately setting them up and then closing the loops in the right order so that at all times we know what our primary story is and the other things are contributing to that primary story, which is so important for, setting up your readers' expectations and then delivering on them so that when you deliver on the expectations, the reader is not confused as to what you are delivering on. So they know what that primary plot is and they are able to recognize those secondary plot threads, but as they pertain to the primary plot thread. So, and she did that really nicely with this one. And then, yes, I had a big old note of like, if you're listening to this and you're not a romance reader, so probably we'll just start with the caveat, huh? Just to like get it out of the way. So if you are listening to this and you're not a romance reader, Be advised, so you can still get a lot from the episodes if you don't read the book, but if you do, these are like very explicit sex scenes in particular. So in any steamy romance, you're going to get sex scenes. But because this kind of starts to shift into dark romance, we also deal with things like kink, which makes them very explicit. And so if that is not your thing, or I'm thinking about people who come like from my audience, right, who are like not romance readers at all, this is going to be a jarring read. So you may want to, skip the sex scenes and just like skip, if you're on the audiobook, just like skip, 30 seconds and just keep, you'll know if it's still going on, I promise. You won't be confused, or skip, a few pages ahead. But it's just, I think it's important to warn people who are not ordinarily romance readers. So if you're not used to steamy scenes in the first place, this one is gonna take your eyebrows clean off. So just be advised. And also, it does deal with trauma. I don't think it deals with it in it's not looking at something like we saw with Ninth House, like that level of content warning. But it does deal with, the themes of trauma. So if you're worried, always check your trigger warnings and content, the trigger warning database. I don't know if Twisted Love is listed on there, but you can look up pretty easily any content warnings for any given book. So just if those are any kind of sensitivities, just make sure that you, protect yourself and do your research in advance so you don't get caught off guard. So that's out of the way. So why don't we go ahead and talk about dark romance versus contemporary? I feel like that leads kind of really nicely into that compare and contrast of those two, and how this one is sort of, contemporary at its heart, but pulling in dark elements.
Yeah, I think you want to talk about the dark romance because it does cause it to go there, right? Whether it's the intimacy scenes, or some of the issues that it tackles. And so in this case, the difference, we still have our spectrum of having a happily ever after and watching the progression of this romantic relationship. But you also have the main characters that are dealing with traumatic issues. So here we have both the dark and the element of their backstory and what they're sort of addressing. You also have a dark and the element of the kink and or like taboo aspects of their physical intimacy. And then you also, the final thing, have dark elements around some of the external plot. And it's not as much on page. We see it a little bit through the Alex's world, but it's not front and center, and that's what helps this particular story still feel very rooted in a contemporary romance, but you have those elements that play a very vital part in the storyline, and so you want to know that they're there. But the great thing is it doesn't give it a whole lot of treatment, even though we understand how it affects them now, and we get enough of it to be grounded in what's going on, but it is something that you want to be mindful of. And I think dark romance, I've had so many different definitions of it. And for me personally, or when I'm working with a client that is writing dark romance, I'm just looking at which one of those levers are you pulling in this particular story. And some of them, they're only pulling one, and it may be more on the light side when we think about Beautifully Cruel, right? Versus in this story, that it's pulling several of them. But what's happening is that we're not so much planted in his world, and that also affects how much our exposure is. And so that is helpful to keep this still feeling very much contemporary, instead of it being more of having more of a suspense, more of an edge to the story. And so that's what you're going to find in this story.
Yeah, so what would you say, like, are the kind of relative, like, pros and cons of either opting into dark romance or incorporating dark romance elements?
I would say a pro that I think is a great pro is the fact that romance already gives us this opportunity to look at the full spectrum of the human emotions and really dig into characters. And I think that's what makes it so fascinating, that we really can get high highs and low lows in a dark romance, because it's literally almost like nothing is off limits. And it really, the limitations only really dictated by brand. But I think part of that is the cons, because it is also very emotionally jarring. And a lot of times it comes with some of those other aspects. Like you may have people that can handle the morally gray, criminal elements, but they don't handle the kink, or they don't handle the traumatic situations from their past as well. And so I think it can open up to an audience, but it can also be a deal breaker. And I think the one thing too is when you hear dark romance, that it has such a huge spectrum now that people usually hear it and sort of identify one aspect of it, maybe that one dark romance that they had, and it just so happens it's like the one that's all the way over there that you shouldn't have even been looking at, right? Like, you know better, girl. Like, back up. And you was over there being curious, right? And so it's usually that one, when the reality is dark romance can come when so many, it's like, how many different colors can you get in a Crayola? You know, you really can have a span. And I think it took me working with authors that their specialty and their genre is dark romance to realize it's just like every other genre, that you get so many different flavors, and what you just do is define what that is by brand. And then you will read something like, okay, I can go up to this point, but once you get here, that's not me. And I've had some, and I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that this is written in a book, you know?
I haven't even seen the half of what's in romance, and I feel that way regularly. I'm like, are those words on the page that I'm seeing right now?
Listen, I will not say the name of the book. One day I may tell you, but I remember this one book, and it was so popular, and the cover was so beautiful, and people were talking about it so much, and I was like, I have got to read this book. I got this book, and I read the book, and my face felt like it was on the floor, like my jaw was open the entire time. And I'm like, people were posting about this book like it was like it was, I don't know, like it was just Pride and Prejudice or something. And it was amazing, and it was so beautifully written, and it was like a political, romantic, almost like a Dante's Inferno kind of, like, it was so good. But every time I thought I had readjusted my constitution to be able to take it, she upped it. By the time I was done, I was like, listen, I may never be able to read another one of her stories, but I can absolutely appreciate that story was fire. But it was, so here's the thing. But I think one of the things that we do talk about in one of the episodes that is coming up is the fact that part of this is having those moments where you can draw your lines, right? Of like, okay, I can appreciate what I learned from this, but this ain't my lane. This is not my bag. And part of the cons of the emotions is the fact that you really do get these people that are very diverse. And that have some things, and everything's not squeaky clean, and you know, it just has a little bit of a roughness and edge to it, like life. It's sort of like when we went through different things in our world, in our country, that we found different niches of novels almost disappear, right? You hardly ever hear about apocalyptic novels as much as you did for a while there. After we went through what we went through around the world. And I think it's just very telling a lot of times. And this is probably a conversation for another day, but very telling of where we are in our culture and in our world, and how tapped in we are to our feelings and our needs and our healing. And so the fact that you still in a dark romance get the full, complete happily ever after, it just means that road is a little bit rocky. And so it will be, you know, the pro is that you can kind of also look at it in so many different levels, whether you do mafia or whether you just do a guy that is morally gray, and his business is like he does a little this and a little that, and he doesn't mind keep, you know, hiding people's secrets to make them do what he wants them to do, you know, and it makes him have another layer of edge. And I think the other, probably the con, is that there's still, I don't know if it's a con, but maybe somewhere in between of like, I think it has to be a level of discretion or intention, and maybe being very aware that when we're writing stories, we are really affecting people's moods, their disposition, their ethos, their constitution. Like, you are tapping into something like that. And I think that that means that we shouldn't take it lightly, even though I know everybody has their own thoughts on that. But I have found that reading it and having it as a part of my reading experience, it does help me to start defining where my boundaries are as a writer. Yeah. And of course, it establishes those as a reader as well.
Yeah, and I think this is maybe a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the character development that we see in this story of, because you talked specifically about dark romance gives us the opportunity to really explore a wider spectrum or go further on that spectrum than your ordinary contemporary romance, right? Contemporary romance sort of stays within, again, it's still emotional, it's still heartfelt, it's still deep, but it's, we stay within certain parameters because of what the genre kind of requires or what readers want out of that genre. And so dark romance takes that further, and you really see that in the setup for our characters in this story, because both are dealing with trauma. And we'll talk about this in later episodes, but we're looking at two characters who are dealing with a similar subset of problems, right? Who are dealing with they've experienced like trauma on the same spectrum, but on like opposite sides, right? Alex lost people, Ava was almost killed. And then using that to show us how they became who they became and what that means for them individually, and the choices they made on the other side of that, and how it shaped them, and then how their healing journeys, right, progress through, healing from what happened and the person that they kind of became on the other side of it and becoming more fully integrated. But you couldn't get something like that without pulling in dark elements. In a pure contemporary romance, you're not going to see that level of trauma and that level of sort of like people experiencing violence in life the way that you would see that in a dark romance. And that's exactly what we see in our character development for this story.
Yes, and I would also say that what makes this very interesting and a little bit different, I mean, granted, I have not read every single dark romance, but why I would pick it and why I find that I read this often with clients that think they want to write dark romance is because it's wrapped in a contemporary packaging, right? So even though this is what they're experiencing, I mean, we find a girl who's doesn't have a ride in the rain out to go pick up a birthday cake for her brother. Mm-hmm. I mean, going to a birthday party, a going away party for her brother, going to study or do away doctors and medical whatever medical overboard. I can't think of it.
Without Borders, that type.
Yeah, there
of
we go.
thing.
That kind of programming, right? So it's still very much contemporary, and I think that's what makes this sort of like hit those nodes, but without right. And I think it makes it a little more palatable so that you can get that experience. And so you do have Alex that sort of embodies this dangerous, dark protector. He has all of the things that I sort of was going to talk about, like whether the tropes of, he's the bad boy, he's the morally gray, he's the one he's the billionaire, he's the one that's driving a clean whip that's pulling up, you know what I'm saying? Like all of those things, right? The eyes, the disposition, I don't laugh. Look, he the one hold up the wall. He ain't dancing at the club, right? But that's Alex, right? He's all those things. And he's sort of this he's just the alpha male that women like reading in romance. And then you have Ava. And so you have Ava who is a little more carefree. She comes off as being very optimistic. We learn more about where that comes from. She is the one that's sort of the life of the party. She's a friend. She has great girlfriends. So you have all those things that we know from. She has a sense she's very strong, but she's strong in the way that's almost surprising, but not. Right, as you read her story, and it's not in the way that you're like, girl, I'm tired of her, right? But you're really rooting for her, like you really want her to win. And so for them to be such opposites, and for the I kind of in our previous or in one of the episodes, you'll hear me say she's like sunshine with scars, right? Because it's a choice, and we start learning that about, like, she has a quiet strength. That's what I really want to say, a quiet strength. And with him, that quiet strength becomes vocal, which makes it really great. And so what you find here with the characters, and also kind of blending in the thing with the tropes and the universal fantasies, is the fact that we have a lot of those elements that are common in romance. Billionaire, bad boy, morally gray, grumpy sunshine, good girl, bad boy, brother's best friend, forced proximity, woman in peril, like, right? All secrets, all of those things that you'll normally find, but it has this edge. And when it takes that full turn, you're just like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it so good. So you get to explore that with them. You get the highs and the lows, and you also get it where I think dark romance has the wonderful access to having bigger transformations because it is so high and low, and you have that spectrum of emotions. And so you have access to those transformations, because it's not like, oh, my ex broke my heart, and yes, it hurt, right? But now I found love again, and that's not bad. Don't get me wrong, because that's my stories, right? But here, or, Runaway Bride or whatever, it's something where it's some stuff that they really have to get over, and we get to see them sort of navigate the world and be willing to address those places in them and those wounds in order to get there happily ever after. So we still have it, still end state is still the same.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, because you started talking about, all the different tropes that we have. And I was so pumped because I was like listening to it and I was like, Grumpy Sunshine! Because you being our resident romance expert and introducing me to the wild world of romance. So I am like, over time learning and experiencing what the different tropes are, since this is more out. It's becoming less and less this way, but it's more outside my genre. And so, I got introduced to Grumpy Sunshine back with the things we never got over. And so then when I saw it again, I was like, I know this one! But when because the tropes kind of also blend into those universal fantasies, and that was another topic that you really wanted to touch on. So can you kind of tell me, what are universal fantasies, and what kinds of universal fantasies are we seeing? And if they're connected to particular tropes or not, I'm not sure. But give me the rundown.
Girl, I can't give you the rundown on that. That is a dissertation. However, universal fantasies, because if I would have to sit and think. Universal fantasies come from a book by T. Taylor. Her first name is Theodora, but the book is T. Taylor is the author. And it's called Seven Figure Fiction. If you are watching the video on YouTube, I'm showing the cover. It's called Seven Figure Fiction by T. Taylor. And basically the premise, I'm doing this very loose. You have to read the book for yourself. She does have an audiobook, and it's a great book. But it's about this thing that what you're tapping into when you are writing to readers is not always genre, but it's about there are universal fantasies that readers have, and that's what you're delivering, right? And so in this story, I think part of those universal fantasies is being chosen, being desired, like, and it's like the hot, cool, rich, bad boy picking you, being protected, being seen for who you are. And what you will find, at least this is the way my brain makes sense of it, because if you look, she even has like a workbook and some more resources. But the way my brain wraps around it is the fact that universal fantasies sort of weave in the best parts of tropes and why we select certain ones together. Yep. And so, and it can make it so that you may have readers that they may say, you know what, I don't normally read blah, 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 but they really enjoy this particular story because that universal fantasy speaks to them. And so here, I think that there's a lot of that. It's sort of like when we have the conversation about wrapping in how the sort of kink comes in, and it almost feels a little bit odd with Ava sort of being this sort of good girl, this good girl, bad boy. But there is some aspect of where like you don't feel embarrassed and you don't feel like you have to have this clean, squeaky clean sort of persona, versus being who you are and being able to explore it in a safe way, even though it's edgy, right? Or whatever. So this story really, I think it embodies it. And I think that's what has turned it into being such a powerhouse of a book, and where it's this thing that's like been viral, and it sort of trends on TikTok, and the fact that it's 4 years old and still very popular. I think it has a lot to do with the meshing of those. And the final thing that I will say about it, and I don't want to say that I think it's unique to romance, but I think romance writers are probably some of the first ones that embrace it and sort of like letting our trope flag fly. And that tropes are a huge part of every single story, whether people want to believe it or not. Yeah. Now, I think romance is just ones that our readers, especially when you think about Kindle Unlimited readers, are very much aware of it. And then not only does it help you with sort of creating the stories that you want to tell and sort of wrapping it around that packaging, but it also makes for ease of marketing and promoting and doing all of those other things because it's something that they are familiar with. Every single reader, no, but a bulk of them, absolutely. Yeah. If you go to some romance books, they'll have the tropes right on the page in their A+ content. So I think that that's another part of it that's a common with romance. And so with that said, I think here it's blended in a way where we have the edge of it while still having the packaging being in a contemporary romance or a steamy romance, and then having those moments where we're hit with that suspense.
Yeah.
And it all flows seamlessly together. And and so I think that's what makes this work really well. And it almost takes your marketing net, and makes it bigger.
Yeah, which I think, just to your point, I think that's probably one of the factors that is why this book blows up on social media, right? Because it's like everybody can find something they like in it, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that, the way that, and this goes back to kind of the nesting of the plots, but like, she sets up very early in the story these promises of what kind of story you're going to get. The first promise she sets up is at its core contemporary romance. The way that they meet, the situation, like that is like immediately there. And that's the first thing that we see. And then she starts to layer in, but we're going to see some other stuff too. And so she brings in, and we see like, oh, like Ava has nightmares, and why does she have these nightmares? And I'm pretty sure it's like chapter 2, we're in Alex's POV for the first time, and he's like, yeah, I'm into that freaky stuff. And he just like, it's in his narration of, I promise he doesn't say it like that. He says it way hotter than I gave him credit for. But like, immediately she introduces there's going to be a facet of kink at work in this story. So when it happens, it's not like we're like, what's happened? We already knew. We got warning that this was coming. And so she does that so that we see, first and foremost, our setup and our promise is contemporary romance. And then in those next couple of scenes, so she does it early enough so that we're not like, again, in the middle of the book and she's like, I told you I was going to do this, and we're like, yeah, you told me just now at 50%. But she in those very early scenes starts to show us, oh, but there's this history of violence that they've both been kind of subjected to. And Alex has kind of like a revenge thing going on. We don't really know the details about it, but we know that, revenge is coming in there, somewhere. And so what it's doing is setting it up so that we're mostly getting the contemporary romance. But when the time comes to deliver on those dark aspects, we're surprised at what happens, but we're not like, oh, what book am I in? And They're not confused. And that's really comes down to the nesting of those plots to create those setups so we know what our primary setup is, and it's the final one she delivers on in the biggest, most robust way. Then we get these smaller setups that she weaves in along the way. So as the stakes are escalating, those things start coming more and more to the surface, but they also resolve before our contemporary romance does, so that at all times we are very clear about what story we're in, what the main point of the story is, and everything else is serving that one purpose. And that's really how she managed to tie all of those together so that, again, people who like contemporary romance might be on board with this one. People who like dark romance might be on board with this one. And so it's capturing a wider audience because she manages to strike a really nice balance between all those elements.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And so with that, we also have some of those other things that also just makes it a win. The fact that we have the dual transformation, both Ava and Alex. And even though Alex feels like he's this unmovable force, he's not, right? And so we have that. And I think one of the distinguishing parts in a great way, and you don't have this all the time that I can think of. I couldn't think of, honestly, another dark romance where I remember, but where there's a redemption arc in a sense that even though he's still morally gray, but there is a redemption arc. And I think it's because she goes there so much so when we hit that climactic point. And again, I feel like that's what makes this such a great book to do this sort of conversation on and to study, because you don't have to, I feel like I don't know how to say this, but you don't have to wonder what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Like, it's plainly written. Mm-hmm. Nothing is being hidden. Now, there are some aspects that we don't know yet, but she does it as a great way of having these open, instead of open loops, it's more like questions that you're starting to, have and starting to clock as you go through. So therefore, it really helps you to begin to say, okay, this is what happened. Now, what am I looking at? What am I seeing? And how did she build me up to this point? And again, it is shocking sometimes, but it's not shocking, right? Because she laid the groundwork. So it's shocking, but you're not surprised.
Yeah.
That may be the way that I say it, because you see it coming, but you don't. And I think that that's always one of the best things, especially when you have a novel that's long, because you're always working towards this thing of ensuring that you have the right pacing and that you're escalating the conflict enough to keep us on the hook, and that you're not repeating the same thing that we've experienced before that, but it's a progression of it. And I think she just does a great job of that when you look at it here. So we have that they both change, that he has this redemption, that they both have a healing that is unique to them, and that is wholly due to the work that they're doing in the story. And then that love makes them better.
Yeah.
And so basically it has everything. Look, it has everything. Even the furniture moving across the floor. I have to mention that in the overview. There's furniture moving, y'all. It is furniture moving. Okay.
There are so many things I wish I could say on a recorded line that I won't say that I have said to you offline.
You have.
When the mic is not hot, because oh man, I'll just tell. So to circle back to my warning. And I'm not going to get into specifics because this is, even though we have the explicit rating, like, we don't need to go all the way into it.
We don't.
But I was listening to the book, preparing for the podcast, all the good stuff, and we got to that first sex scene, and I was listening to it, and I was sitting there just looking around like, what we're doing what? And like, it's weird, right? Because you listen to it in headphones, and the world around you is being completely normal. And you have something happening in your ears that you are like, what? Oh no, should I leave the room? Because I don't feel like I should be here for this. And then you're like, but it's in my ear, and I have to read the book to go, what do I do? So that was my experience of the first sex scene. So you're gonna, again, it's very steamy. You're gonna get all the things. And if you want to know how I felt about it, I was like, I think that I should be somewhere else, but I gotta listen to this book for a podcast, and the only way forward is through. About the sex scenes. It was a lot to take in.
Listen, let the record show. Y'all, I'm having my Claire Huxtable moment. Let the record show. We know Rachel is dramatic. And we also know that Rachel is not a romance reader. And I'm the one like, what? There was something crazy in the book.
Yes. Dana was like, you are so dramatic. And then you listen, you're like, okay, well, I mean, it was steamy, but...
I mean,
but she was not impressed. She was unmoved. She was like, yeah, it was steamy, but it's like normal steamy. And I'm like, I don't want to know what not normal steamy is. I don't, and I'm scared that in 2026 I might find out. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I'm scared.
I feel like the moment that you are no longer shocked by it will be the craziest point. So maybe we just want to accept you being shocked. But because I was like, Rachel, I was like, girl, that was what, this ain't nothing. It reminded me of the other story. What was it?
Dead Until Dark?
Yes!
But that was only because you hadn't gotten to the steamy parts yet. You thought that I was clutching my pearls at a makeout session.
First of all, you were clutching your pearls.
Second of all, that was my first ever romance novel, and I was like, what is happening?
But you were so... And then I was like, okay, maybe it is a little explicit, but it was not all... Yes.
Well, and far less explicit than anything else that we did for the rest, in the podcast. Like, the things we never got over was probably my first, contemporary steamy romance, I think. And that one, I was like,
that one did.
Okay.
It was good, but it wasn't. That's where you start having where the balance between whether you have kink or taboo, intimacy or whatever that can get a little bit more. But it was out there. I mean, it was steamy. It was steamy. Yeah, it was spicy.
It was spicy. It's
okay.
So,
look at you.
Look, growth. Okay, who knows? So this is, we didn't mention this at the beginning of the episode, but this is our last book pick for 2025.
Yes.
And we'll talk more about what's coming up in December when we get there. But for now, we've got 3 more weeks of Twisted Love by Ana Huang. So, but this we've wrapped up. This is our last book pick for 2025, and we're already working on our 2026 lineup. And so that's also a good opportunity to say, if you guys want to see a certain book, drop it in the comments. Before we wrap for the day, Dana, is there anything else that you want to say about this book? Any points we didn't hit? Any last remarks you would like to make before we set off on our journey of plot, character, and our final editor's takeaways for this book?
I would say, as a reminder of the warnings, if you're listening to the audiobook, you can always 36 seconds past it. If you're reading a book, you can always skim read it. But I do think that there is a lot that can be learned here. I think even if you didn't read the book, you'll gain quite a bit from listening to our episodes like normal. Yeah. But I think you'll get 10 times more by reading it because we can't cover everything. So I would say try. If you have Kindle Unlimited, it is in Kindle Unlimited or whatever, just try. And I think it will be a great opportunity as we move forward to look at what we've said, the plot, the character development. You're going to get a little dash of the other stuff. It's going to come with it. But I think once you get above those scenes and you really get to know those characters, you're invested. And I think that's the biggest thing. I also feel like this set of episodes are very good at sort of almost a little bit tying a bow on what we've explored a little bit over this year, besides what we have coming up in December, but in a way of basically progressively growing as we move forward through this podcast and being able to sort of have moments to be able to call back to that are a little less explicit and a little less aggressive. But this is a great contrast and a great example to pair with those. And I think the final thing which we will discover or talk a little bit more in a future episode is I think this is one of those stories where it may help you to start defining what your boundaries are and help you to define what types of stories you want to tell. Because even if you don't want to write romance, I think being able to track where this progression is going with the evolution of their romance, but also the evolution of their transformation. Can be taken into any genre. And so it is very clear. So then having that clarity, you may say, okay, I don't want chandelier swinging or furniture moving. Okay. Unless it's my furniture. But we ain't going to ask you about your furniture. Okay. But you may say that, but it may be that you have this opportunity to look at, this is where they start. This is what they had to go through. This is how that climactic scene blew up their world. And this is how they found their way back to have a happily ever after. And that is a great thing to be able to sort of clock in your toolbox as a writer.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about this book is just to your point, even if you're not a romance writer and you want to understand how those transformations work, it's very, very clear in this story. And I think in general, and it's certainly through the catalog that we've gone through this year, in our romance picks in particular, like they're very, very clear what that transformation is, how it's tested, how the breakup and the all is lost kind of like sets them, is, a huge setback that sort of sets them backwards, that forces them to confront that thing, so that they can come back together in the end. I think that romance is especially clear with that kind of transformation. So it's really a good genre to look at when you want to see those transformations, and it really explicitly, like you're really seeing them come all the way through, because it's baked into the genre and how it works and what it requires for a romance to work, for us to actually be sold on it and feel like, oh yes, like I believe this couple and them coming together. So romance in particular, I think, are really good for sort of looking at that and seeing how that functions in a story in general.
And I'm glad you pointed that out. I think it also is helpful because a lot of times this is the part that's missing, right? People usually reach for doing a romance subplot. You may find that instead of reaching for a romance subplot, you may want to do a little more depth on their personal growth or transformation, so that it basically taps into that element in us as your reader and pulls us along on that journey. And I think that's why you find romance as being a really great contender for a subplot, because what it's going to do is it tests, did you learn the lesson?
Absolutely.
Can you execute the lesson when it counts with someone you care about and someone that you love, whether it's to protect or it's to provide for, or is it to love, or whatever it is. And so I think that's the part. And right now we're saying in a very general way, and in the story it's very, very, very specific. But because of this conversation, what we're asking you to do is look at it and then lift and say, okay, what part of this can I really sort of attach to?
Yeah.
And use and help me and challenge me to write this character or these characters in a more authentic, real way that makes the reader like hang on your every word.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is your, if you haven't already read the book in preparation for these episodes, this is sort of your recommendation and all of your caveats and warnings to be ready for what you're going to get on the inside of the book. But with that, we will go ahead and call it a day here. So thank you everyone so much for joining us. We're so excited for you to get to join us for our conversations on plot, character, and then we have some really great conversation in our editor's takeaways as well. So if you have not already, please do like this podcast, and don't forget to subscribe so you always know when new episodes are coming out. And hit the heart, leave us a rating and review, and hit all the nice buttons. Don't hit the thumbs down, that's not good. Hit all the other ones though, and leave us a comment. Again, let us know what kind of books you'd like to see in 2026, any questions that you have. Give us your first impressions in the comments of this book and how you felt when you read this book, and if your eyebrows are still on or if they're completely gone. Listen. As mine are. So thank you everyone so much. We appreciate you. We will be back next week with our discussion on the plot of Twisted Love by Ana Huang. But until then, happy writing.